Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Secretary, hello. Seems like every conversation with the Secretary of Agriculture for as long as I've been in the Congress includes conversations about disaster. And I want to highlight a problem we have with the Emergency Livestock Relief Program. We've had drought and wildfires across our state, but most recently in December of 21, 160,000 acres across 13 counties in Kansas burned. Grassland, forage sorghum, and other feed sources that producers rely on to get through the winter. Since those fires occurred outside the, quote, normal grazing period, these producers are not eligible for LFP and therefore are not being helped by disaster assistance. USDA described in the announcement on March 1st as Phase 1. Will Phase 2 of the disaster assistance provide support to livestock producers who lost forage and grazing lands to wildfires outside normal grazing periods?
Senator, we are in the process of developing a list of those non-covered disasters, as the one you've just mentioned, to make sure we have a comprehensive list, and then from that list we're going to make a determination of how best to spend and invest the second tranche of resources. Certainly understand what you've outlined, and I will tell you that the concerns that you've expressed are on the list. They've been placed on the list. I want to make sure that I check with our folks to make sure that I'm right when I say we're going to consider this seriously. I don't know that we've necessarily made a decision yet about exactly who gets what, but I know that it's on the list.
If you would give me the chance to make the case it should be high on the list, I'd appreciate that.
Certainly.
Does USDA expect to need additional funding for ad hoc disaster assistance?
Well, I'm never going to answer a question where do you need additional resources. Here's the problem, Senator, and you've addressed it. Our disaster assistance programs are sort of a one-size-fits-all, and the reality is we're now learning that there are multiple types of disasters in multiple different areas involving multiple commodities and in multiple different ways. And it's going to be important and necessary for us, I think, to have enough flexibility and resources to be able to try to tailor the disaster assistance to the actual disaster, as opposed to having a one-size-fits-all, and sometimes your folks don't fit in it, and that's unfortunate. More resources, but I would say in addition to more resources, let's make sure it's flexible enough to be able to use it for multiple disasters.
I always like that flexibility until it doesn't cover something that I think needs to be covered, and I appreciate the conversation, and perhaps you're leveraging me to suggest we need more disaster assistance, more dollars. Input costs, fertilizer prices. I've asked the subcommittee that I'm the lead Republican on has jurisdiction over the Department of Commerce. We are trying to do something about countervailing duties on phosphates from Morocco and to stop the implementation of duties on nitrogen fertilizer from Trinidad and Tobago. Can you help? Can you be an ally in any of this?
Well, we've certainly indicated a necessity of looking at those countervailing duties. In addition, as you know, we've announced an effort to try to put resources on the table to see what we could do here in the United States to produce more fertilizer. We're also working with producers on crop choice and conservation practices that could potentially reduce fertilizer use. We're also focusing on a split nitrogen policy for crop insurance that will basically cover crop losses if you decide to half your nitrogen application. I mean, there are a series of things we're doing. We're also working with state attorney generals to take a look at whether or not the fertilizer costs that are currently being paid by farmers are legitimate. It's a very interesting graph. If you take a look at the history of fertilizer and crop prices, as crop prices go up, so do fertilizer costs. Maybe there's no reason for that. But
Mr. Secretary, thank you. I don't understand the love affair with countervailing duties on components of fertilizer, and I'll continue my efforts, and I appreciate any help you can give. The supplemental double cropping issue, planting soybeans after winter wheat, just announced a week or so ago. I would remind you that sorghum is a major food crop for many African nations, and it's a crop that can be planted behind wheat in many parts of Kansas. Additionally, much of the world's sunflower oil comes from Ukraine, another crop that could be utilized in that fashion. Why does the administration's supplemental request only propose to incentivize soybean and not include other food crops like sorghum and sunflowers?
It was a conservation. It was a conversation starter, and you're absolutely right. And there's no reason why we couldn't include those, and should.
And would that include the $10 per acre incentive for?
To the extent that there are incentives that we're looking at or flexibilities that we're looking at, we're going to try to be as comprehensive as we can be.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Appreciate your answers.